And we're live. Welcome to yet another coronavirus edition of the PCS Q&A. I am your host, MJ Boyce. I am the Director of Community Outreach at PCS Grades. As always, we have our lovely Megan Harless, our resident PCS reform advocate, and also resident PA. Censoring for little ears in the room because I love you. Now, we have a very special guest today, and before we go ahead and get to Crystal Cornwall, who is the CEO and president of the Safe Military Housing Initiative, we're going to go over those housekeeping items and then throw it over to Megan for some DoD updates. So, housekeeping items, we know the drill. Here we go. On your market, set. Today, I'm starting this week in a little bit of reverse. I'm going to talk about the flattening of the curve because you all don't live in a box, although we feel like it because of COVID, but those cases are ticking up. And we really, really need to do our part because I miss peopling very badly. So let's all do our part to flatten that curve, because what's going to happen when we flatten that curve is we're going to flatten Murphy with it. Murphy, you're on notice. We're coming for you. Watch out. We are ready. Next up is we bring experts to you for a reason, whether that's Transcom, whether that's about our education advocates, or whether that's military spouse movers. We bring them to you because they have the answers. But the bottom line is whether we have the answers or not. Like if we know the answers, we're going to give them to you. If we don't know the answers, we know who does. And if we don't know either of those things, we're going to take your question for action. But no matter what happens, the end all forever and always resources for you concerning your specific move will forever and always be, number one, your local chain of command. Number two, your local transportation office. Those are the people who know you. Those are the people who are dealing with your stuff. Those are the decision makers that can help make some headway in whatever specific situation you're in. So hit them up if we can't answer your questions. And like I said, we bring these guys, we're answering your questions. We are going to take them for action if we don't know that answer or don't know who does. But let me just tell you, it's kind of rare. We've been stumped one time. Come at me, bro. One time. Stump us. We want you to. We want to go down the rabbit hole for you. All right. Without further ado, I'm going to toss it over to Megan for those DoD updates. Megan?
Hey, everybody. We've got a couple of updates for you this week. The first one, so Marine Corps, there was a new MAR admin published on July 14th. It is MAR admin number 396-20. It is titled Reinforcing Guidance Regarding Transportation, Pets, Housing, and Quarantine with a PCS to Japan. So if you are PCSing to Japan, you should go back and read that MAR admin if you are part of the Marine Corps. One of the things addressed in that MAR admin is that the only authorized mode of transportation from the U.S. to Japan is by using the Patriot Express. Commercial air is expressly prohibited in that MAR admin. Part of that is because of how they have to do the restriction of movement and the quarantine process once you arrive in Japan. So if you're Marine Corps, you need to go check out MAR admin 396-20 if you are PCSing to Japan only. Another thing is that, with PCSing, a lot of times people will mail their packages to and from CONUS to CONUS, vice versa, to try to get some things, high value things maybe over there a little bit safely, or additional stuff that they just want to have, but they can't take it in their carry-on for whatever reason. Starting August 13th, for anything that you are mailing, you will no longer be allowed to use the handwritten customs forms. You will have to do the online customs forms and have them pre-printed ahead of time before you go to mail your packages. One thing I want to touch on really quick that we have seen discussions about in the spouse groups lately is about the use of what they call a shuttle for your household goods when you're working on your pack out. So a shuttle is basically if you live on like a narrow street or a very congested area and they aren't able to bring in their big moving truck, they can use what's called a smaller box truck that they call a shuttle to take your items from your home to a nearby parking lot or warehouse or facility to be able to load your household goods onto the bigger truck for transportation. That shuttle is authorized. They are allowed to do it. I've known many people that have had to use it. One thing to know about it, though, is that that day that your items are getting shuttled out of your home, you should still be receiving your inventory and should still be signing your inventory that same day. The last thing I've got for you is about the global household goods contract. We know this thing is coming down the pipeline. We've been talking about it for the last couple of months. Just so you know, there was a protest filed again by 2 of the companies that were not awarded the contract as part of the government process. If they don't win, they can file a protest with the GAO or the federal court system. Right now it's filed with the GAO, so that means it kind of puts a delay in what's going on with the process of the GHC. So my guess is that it takes about 90 to 100 days, I think is their timeline to make a ruling on the protest. But that's going to push us back into like October timeframe. The initial transition period for the GHC was supposed to happen in February. So my guess is that with this protest taking place now, that transition period is probably going to get pushed back a couple of months, and we will not start seeing the transition for the GHC happen until after peak season next year. But as we find out more about that, as you know, GAO wraps up their investigation, their process into the protest piece of it, we'll definitely bring that information back to you and let you know what's going on and how that's going to impact your move next year. So back to you, MJ.
Awesome. Thanks for those updates, Megan. And just a really quick follow-up about that whole contract, the GHC, and we're going to be talking to Transcom a little bit more about that once everything is done, set, and solidified. But do you know how that might impact military families? Is it going to impact us? Is there going to be more of a, you know what I mean?
So it's not impacting anything now. If you are moving now, it's not impacting you. It's going to impact. Like I said, the initial transition period was supposed to happen February 2021, with the goal that they would be implemented handling all CONUS PCSs by peak season. My guess is that that probably will not happen, and they will probably delay the transition period until after peak season, just because nobody wants to go through that transition during peak. But I think that timeline, it's all going to depend on how the GAO does their investigation, how long it takes them. They have 90 to 100 days, I believe. So, I mean, I think it's going to depend if they take all 90 days or if they get it done in the next 10. So that's something we just kind of really got to wait and see on how they handle it and what happens with that.
Oh, we love that hurry up and wait mantra. Story of our lives.
Yes.
All right. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our very lovely guest, Crystal Cornwall, who again is the CEO and president of the Safe Military Housing Initiative. Crystal, can you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited. So, you know, one of the things that we do at Safe Military Housing is we do micro and macro level advocacy. And, you know, the reason why we started this was because we felt like there was a need. There is definitely a need to advocate for families as it relates to housing, because, you know, it's a direct cornerstone of readiness. And we, you know, very much care about that. So for myself, though, personally, I'm a mom. I have 3 kids. I'm married to an active duty Marine. He's been in
Hoorah! Semper Fi!
Semper Fi. And he's been in about 13 years. We're kind of counting down to retirement, and we're very, very excited. I do work at a bank still. I'm a commercial credit analyst or an underwriter. They're kind of basically the same thing. I do that. And of course, I run Safe Military Housing, and I'm in my last 2 classes for my master's. So I'm very excited to have that done. So, but that's just a little bit about me and personally and what we stand for.
Awesome. Well, welcome. And we're very, very glad to have you. So I'm just going to dive right into these questions, man. Here's how we roll. All right. Privatized housing has been in the news for like the past year, but unfortunately, it's not really news for any of us, right? This spans decades. It just happened to be picked up by Reuters, I believe.
Yeah.
And here we go, right? And so it's been kind of on the radar for the last year or so. So can you tell us a little bit about what got you started on this advocacy journey and why privatized military housing?
So
what happened was
What happened was, I personally got started on the journey when I experienced my own housing issues at Camp Pendleton. We had housing issues, at Keesler Air Force Base, which is where the weather school for the Marines is, by the way. And my husband's a supply guy, so he was supporting the Marines at the weather school there. And so when we left in 2017, I was really super upset, really like about the injustice of it all. There was a lack of redress for military families. We went through various avenues, including my husband's command, like his previous command we were leaving. We included the government housing office. We went to the PPV. Like I wrote letters. I even reached out to legal counsel, and nobody could help us. There was no path to resolution for what we felt like was unfair. So I ended up teaming up with Jean Kaufman, which I think some of you have probably talked to before. She was also at Pendleton as well. And we both kind of joined forces and we started researching, and we really uncovered a myriad of systemic military housing issues within the MHPI program. A lot of the issues included things, like tangible issues like mold and lead and asbestos and poor maintenance, etc. But to me, aside from those really dangerous health issues, the biggest thing that we saw was like an overall culture of hostility to military members and their families. And, I just want to preface that with, we are seeing change. And sometimes it takes a long time for cultures to change. Some are doing better than others, but that is what we felt like we saw based on our, what we were researching. And so then we ended up getting in touch with Reuters through another military spouse. And so we kind of took the ball because she wasn't able to pick it up because she was, unfortunately, sadly, was in litigation because her own child had been harmed in military housing. It's a very heartbreaking event. And so through our work, Jean and I both got stationed on the East Coast. And by I getting stationed, I mean my husband got stationed and we went with him. Okay. And then we started lobbying. Jean is a former lobbyist for Native Americans. And so we started lobbying. Isn't she awesome? We started lobbying based on her knowledge and strategy on who we needed to go with the Senate and the HASC and the SASC. And we met with various leaders, and we also obviously worked the Reuters story. And what catapulted us to this was our Marine Corps family and the Reuters story that broke in October, November. And that was actually one of the very first cases Jean and I ever advocated on. Yeah, so that's how we got here.
Word. And can I just really quick, I just want to put this out there to our entire audience. There are a lot of instances that we have in our military life that we're going to be like, well, I mean, this sucks. Embrace the sucks, sure. But at the same time, it's like you feel alone. You feel like it's the world against you. You feel like you're just one person who's going to listen to me. Let me tell you something, people, if you think that right now. If you have a cause, if you are experiencing something, people like Crystal, people like Megan, people like myself, we are examples that your voice does matter. And yeah, you might take a minute, and yeah, you might sound like a broken record, but guess what? Just like she said, stuff's changing. So I just want to give you that encouragement. So if you're thinking that right now, stop thinking that. Megan.
Yeah. So definitely. So, okay. So now here we are in this current state of affairs, our current environment, COVID, stop move orders, non-stop move orders, you're moving, you're not moving, a lot of uncertainty for military families. So how is it, are some of the housing companies helping families during this time when they're working on trying to clear their home and then suddenly their orders change, they're being delayed, they're stuck in place? What's kind of going on with that?
So, I mean, as we know, we, PCS several times, we all have painfully, and we know there's a bazillion moving parts to every PCS, right? So the moving part for housing, as far as I know, and what I'm hearing back from families, which is that's my litmus test, is what are families saying? Most families are coming back and saying, yes, they are working with us. They have been accommodating, which means, so say you've received orders and oh my gosh, all of a sudden you can't go. Your orders are canked because, COVID. They're allowing them to extend their leases. And in some cases, you know, they're trying to open up houses. So if no one's leaving, right, but people are coming, they're still trying to figure out that sort of situation. And they are trying to be accommodating for the most part. There has been a couple of instances where, unfortunately, the economic impact seems to always fall on military families. We had a family, I believe, at another station. They had already reserved their house in Virginia, but unfortunately, COVID came down and they were not able to move. But if they let this other house go, they were going to lose out on a great house, a fantastic school district, which now none of us are actually going back to school, most of us. But they missed out on all, they would have missed out on these very important pieces of why you kind of like get on the list and reserve your house. So unfortunately now they're having to pay 2 mortgages or rent, and then, you know, their rent here. And, you know, that's really super unfortunate. I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but I do have some resources for that later on.
Word. I appreciate that. Because it's all the resources. Give me all the resources. And speaking of resources, as Crystal and as Megan are giving these resources and mentioning them, we are going to drop those links into the comments section, and we're also going to be including that in our blog. I'm pretty sure Liz Ann Lightfoot, our content editor over at PCS Grades, shout out, is watching this because she just transcribes it just for you every week, people. So feel privileged. Okay, so if a family is having to change their orders, like due to the current situations, to the COVID crazy, if you will, and their local office isn't assisting like in any way, like what can they do? Who do they go to? Are there any tenant rights? We've heard some things about tenant rights recently. Are there any tenant rights that they should know about that can help them?
Sure. Well, I first want to preface this with, you know, we have to remember that these are joint ventures, okay? So they're considered partnerships, contractual partnerships, okay? So remember that each base leadership and branch of service has a heavy input on how the housing situation is administered, okay? So just remember that the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, these folks have a heavy say in how all this operation goes down, okay? Just so that you know. And the reason why I say that is because we're always like blasting the PPVs, and it's not always the PPVs. It's not always the families. It's not always Congress. It's not always the military. Everybody has a role in that. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that. And since this does depend heavily on the branch of service based on the base, some leadership is better than others, but I think the vast majority of military leadership is willing to work with and fight for families. And I have seen some changes in the PPVs where they are actually doing the same thing. Not everywhere. I don't want to say that every PPV is on board. But
there are pockets, right? You ever notice like the pockets?
For sure. And look, when there are successes, we have to identify what is working right so we can emulate that in other places. That is so important. So what they probably need to do, so there's a couple of things. Every base is different. Every branch is different. And as you guys know, the Navy, I know, let's be consistent, guys. But you know, the Navy and the Air Force have hired housing advocates. I'm not sure if you guys are tracking that. They have hired housing advocates. So if you are Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, they need to first reach out to their local district offices. Those would be your local PPVs, Balfour Beatty, Lincoln, those folks, okay? Unfortunately, if you don't get anywhere with your district office, go ahead and run it up to your regional, okay? If you're not getting if you don't know who your regional is, reach out to us or reach out to your, and we will find out who it is for you, okay? Then after that, if you can't get anywhere, go to your government housing office. And that's where I'm talking about these advocates they just hired. They're beefing up these government housing offices, and they're GS employees, and they are supposed to be objective. And so I will say, though, that the government housing offices, unfortunately, have been hiring, well, fortunately, maybe unfortunately, have been hiring some PPV employees, which has, you know, been a big concern for us.
Is that like a conflict of interest type thing that we might be concerned about?
That's personally
Maybe.
what I am concerned about.
Okay.
And you don't want to put a bad actor into a GS position. And then if they're a good actor and they're leaving the PPV, and now we have to find another good person to replace them with. And, it's like the cycle. And then if they're not getting anywhere with their government housing offices for the Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, listen, you guys need to run this up to NAVFAC, to CNIC. And I actually have an email that I'm going to give you guys. It's Navy Housing HQ at Navy.mil. You should expect a 2-day turnaround and a response. Okay.
And just FYI, what she just said will be dropped into the links here shortly. So please know that you don't have to rewind or replay, although you should, because we're here. We will put those in there for you.
Absolutely.
Everything I'll say.
And I also just want to tell everybody too, while spouses are not in the military, I would encourage your active duty service member to make sure his command is tracking if there is a housing issue, whether it's a moving in issue, a moving out issue, an order issue, a maintenance issue. Please let your commands know. I mean, just the last thing I would want to see, especially if it's a systemic issue, please don't, let your commands get a blindsided phone call. Just give them a heads up, please. And so if you are going to be, I'm going through my notes here. If you're Army, it's a very similar process. Okay. Army has something called Army Material Command, which is very similar to NAVFAC. But before you escalate it up there, you want to go through the same process: district, regional, RCI, and then, of course, the Garrison Command, who works with RCI and the regional PPV. And then, honestly, it could even differentiate by PPV, because all PPVs are set up differently, whereas, like, Lend-Lease has project managers and, oh
my gosh, like they couldn't be, like, confusing enough, right?
No, it's a web. It's a giant web. But, in closing to that, I just want to tell everybody, please document everything. If it's move-in, move-out issues, maintenance records, whatever, take pictures of your move-in and move-out. Make sure that you're keeping copies of everything. And I know some of our very new families are probably not aware of the resources or what they should be doing. If you have a new family moving in, this is for you, commands. If you have a new family who is a young family, a boot lieutenant or a E3, please make sure that they're filling out that paperwork. Please make sure that they're keeping copies. Please make sure that they understand what the housing process looks like and that they have the resources that they need, because we can't be there for all, 205,000 homes. Please.
Word.
Yeah.
For real.
Really quick, you were talking about advocates and reaching out to advocates. We've got a question here about advocates from Heather. Hey, Heather. So are there advocates for childless couples who do not get fair access to housing based on child status?
Good question, Heather.
Oh, that is a good question. So in our advocacy, we advocate basically for the whole spectrum of issues. Some of the things that are on our policy this year are actually, lobbying for increased BAH, for increased BAH. So we advocate for the whole spectrum. So if this is something that she needs help with, we're happy to help her. I would probably need some more information, some more details kind of on what is going on. Because, and I'm not an attorney, so this is not legal advice, guys, at all. But fair housing has some guidelines as it relates to, I think, being married and things like that. So I think we really need to look into this a little bit deeper.
So, I mean, they shouldn't, no matter what, nobody should deny housing based on whether or not you have children. I think that, like, maybe whether you rate a 2-bedroom or a 5-bedroom, yeah, that comes into play, sure. But not housing, period. If not, yeah. So Heather, here's the thing. Here's what I'm going to have you do. I'm going to have you email us, message us on Facebook, message the PCS grades page with your email so that we can toss you over to Crystal and do that warm handoff so you guys can correspond in that way. If you would go ahead and just go to our PCS grades page and throw that message into our inbox, we will, with your email address, we'll get that to you.
Absolutely.
And then another thing that you talked about is that there are resources out there for families. Can you tell us what some of those resources are, and specifically for those families that find themselves in those financial hard spots due to COVID, because either they get stuck paying 2 rents, 2 mortgages, 2 whatever it may be? Are there any financial resources out there to help them?
Well, one of the things that I always defer to is Military One Source. I feel like, we get that out there a lot, but I really feel like Military One Source has a great array of resources. Actually, I actually looked there today because I was wondering, wow, what are they saying these days? Well, what I found out was, in addition to Military One Source, we do have the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, where they are giving grants and or loans, depending on your qualification and the reason, for financial assistance. There is obviously a max for those grants and some qualification standards. And
also, just to piggyback off of that, we did have some peeps from our from the relief societies, both from the Air Force side and the Army side. All, if I'm not mistaken, all branches service relief are doing something related to COVID, and they have those reciprocal agreement things. So you go to one and they'll help you out and hook you up with the other. Right. So that's fantastic, Crystal.
Yes. And like that, you're talking about the Army Emergency Relief and the Air Force Aid Society. Those are all great initiatives. And I'll tell you what, they work hard for these families. They really do. So a lot of respect for those folks. Let me see. And also, just so you guys know, the DoD has issued some hardship pay and some situations where you have to quarantine or other similar issues. If your family has to stay behind due to COVID, unfortunately, you could also potentially get BA at the dependent rate at the new station. So even if like your service member had to go, so you don't have that reduction with the BA without dependents. You definitely need to reach out to your housing offices to get some of that feedback. Obviously go to your commands. Please call Military One Source. They're a great resource for us to use. And definitely call those relief societies and see what else they can do for you as well.
For sure. So here's a question, and Megan's going to follow up on the back end of this one. By the way, I just want to put this out there, everybody. Last week it was lemonade. This week it's literally Kool-Aid. Yes, this is the only Kool-Aid I will drink. Write that down. That was meant to be said the way I said it. Right. Anyways, it is so warm in here. It is hot as Hades, and this is the only thing I have to cool down. Otherwise, you will not be able to hear me. So, as I was saying, Megan's going to follow up with the back end of this question. But in general, is there anything that a military family should know when moving into on-post or on-base housing?
Well, you guys mentioned, earlier the Tenant Bill of Rights. And so there happens to be 2 things. There's a Tenant Bill of Rights. There's also a Tenant Bill of Responsibilities. I'm not sure if you guys are tracking that. There are 2.
No, but we need to have some conversations.
We do. And we did support. Okay, so just so we're prefacing this, we are objective, right? Everybody is accountable. We're trying to be objective. We supported the Landlord Tenant Bill of Rights, obviously, and we actually sent our own documentation up for getting some consideration into that. But we do support a landlord tenant responsibilities piece as well, because we all have a responsibility to do our part, right? Like masks, keeping your work order squared away. Like all of us have a responsibility to do our right thing. So as far as the Tenant Bill of Rights, if you see that it is not being, implemented appropriately, you should report that. Who do you report it to? Well, first, always make sure your chain of command knows. Make sure you talk to your government housing offices. Make sure that you're sending that up. And in the worst of the worst cases, send it, to your Senate leaders if you need to. They are still trying to help families as much as they can. But, and send it to us. We are always happy to help on a micro level as well. So this actually kind of applies to on-base and off-base housing, okay? Because if you're moving on and off-base, like you need to make sure that you're taking pictures, your documentation, your house is like in good working condition. So, make sure that you are electronically submitting all of this documentation. So one of the things I have a hard time helping with is when families come to me and they say they got $8,600 in move-out charges. Not even joking. So I'm like, well, I need pictures of your house. I need to see what they're charging you for. And they're like, well, we didn't do any move-out pictures. So what do? well, I need something to compare that to. If I'm going to be able to help you, I got to have something to like, I got to fight for you. Give me something to fight for you, So make sure that you're doing that, because once you leave, and by the way, they should be doing the inspections with you there now. Okay. In states that are in like a phase 3 status, before they weren't allowing families to be present during the move in and move out procedures, like the inspection.
So would they wait till they were out?
They were either outside or they'd like send a detailed thing later. And I was not happy with that, because, you leave room for some bad actors to not make good choices or for families to not be taken care of. So I recommend, well, first of all, everybody should be able to do their move in and move out inspections as long as you're in like a phase 2 state. Okay. If you're in Florida, listen, you might not be able to do it there. Okay, guys? Like expectation management, right?
You might not be able to do anything in Florida at this point. Shout out, we're thinking about you to our Florida peeps. We're all thinking about you.
My husband's from Florida. God bless him.
Oh.
So, if you're going to hand those copies in, your pictures, your documentation, if you're going to hand them the hard copies in, please make a note of who you're giving it to, the office location, the date, the time, as much identifying information as you can, so that you can have something to back you up later should there be a conflict. I have continued to see where some PPVs, unfortunately, are still blaming families for issues. For example, your house might be a little cluttered or dirty, but that doesn't have anything to do with the rain and the water coming down from the sky and making your ceiling collapse. Mm-hmm. So my suggestion to everybody is to don't give them a reason. And I'm not saying that anybody's dirty. Like, that's not my game. Like, right now I got 3 kids and we're on vacation. I can't make any promises, okay? But please don't give them a reason, because they're looking for reasons, and don't give it to them. And it's been kind of a difficult challenge. That's why documentation is so important, and making sure you're going through the proper channels, because if you don't go through the proper channels, they're going to throw that back on you and say, well, you didn't give regional a chance to fix it. You didn't do this. And some of these companies have like a 3-step process. But really, when you get to the first step, you've already gone through 3 other steps. So it's really like a 7-step process. And how frustrated are families when they've been dealing with this for 2 weeks, 3 months, or when folks are coming back off of deployments to have to manage this for 10 days, which has just recently happened.
Can I just mention, and maybe you can equate this for me. So this is, how like when somebody might be building a website, right? They're going to hire somebody that like the only thing they think about, right, is the user experience. So everything that they do revolves around what that dude says is the user experience. Like, okay, you don't want this because, we have the attention span of a gnat these days. So you don't want them hanging around here too long. So you want to click over here. Like, you have somebody literally thinking inside the brain of people who are going to be utilizing the service, right? Mm-hmm. So why on earth can't we have one person saying, yeah, that's not going to be effective. Nothing's going to change. If the user, i.e. military families, are required to go through this entire process to get to where they need to be, or is that by design? And I'm just saying that generally.
I don't disagree with you. And the concern that we have brought up to them is that it hampers the expeditious resolution that families need, especially when they're moving because of COVID and their orders have already been canked twice, right? We don't want to put walls up to resolve these issues, at the longest length of time. Let's resolve them and like move on. Let the family move on with their lives. But I do want to say, I've kind of thrown a couple of them under the bus, right? But I will tell you, there are some PPVs, especially at a local level, who are doing a very, very good job. Okay. And there are some PPVs who are communicating with us. There are no formal relationships with anybody, whether it's the DOD, the PPV, with us. We just kind of like give everybody a heads up and try to work it out with everybody on a ground level. But there are some who are very receptive to having conversations, and that leads to much faster response times and more satisfaction, I think, with the residents, and it helps kind of rebuild that relationship with the PPVs. And it also helps give them some insight into what they could do better. And there have been several of them that have been very, very receptive to that information and have implemented some of the policies we've asked them to implement. So I am pleased to share that with you guys.
Okay. Word.
Yeah. So the flip side to MJ's question, what do families need to know when it's time to move out of an on-post housing?
Well, as far as COVID is concerned, it's, listen, if you're in one of those red states, don't expect to move in, okay? And plus, you don't want to be around people who might have the Rona, right? It's kind of a dangerous thing. You don't want to be around people like that, right? Just please expect a lot of documentation. And I don't mean just, I'm talking about room to room, wall to wall, ceiling to floor, your backyard, your garages, your driveways, the exterior of the structure, the trash cans. Anywhere that I've known people to be charged, I'm like, take pictures, document it, especially if you can't be there. And, when you do move out, there are like, the problem with moving out is that a lot of families can't afford services, to come and clean up, right? Move out services. So just go ahead and get whatever expectation they have for you guys for the move out cleaning and stuff. You guys all know this. Just go by their list, check it off, make sure it's good to go. And then, of course, as far as coronavirus is concerned, just make sure that you have good expectation management and there's good communication on all sides. It's not just the military family's responsibility to have conversations with everybody. Everybody needs to do their part for expectation management. The PPVs need to be putting out documentation or like these, if you're in Florida, right, you're at MacDill or something, the PPV there needs to make sure they're telling families what to expect. There needs to be continuous communication. The commands need to know what to expect. The government housing offices need to know what to expect. And the families need to know what to expect. And if they have any questions, send it in writing and route it up.
You know what? I really like that. And it's so, now every single person watching, every single person on this webinar right now, we've all had our experience with housing in some way, shape, or form, or know somebody who has. Now, that being said, the expectation management that you were talking about, I like to kind of, so I'm really, I'm too much to my kids' chagrin, I'm really a fan of the phrase, come at me, bro. Like, it's just, because that means that I have my stuff together. What do you got? Nothing. Boom. And
Right.
So I'm all about the CYA, which is cover your arse.
Right.
For little ears in the room, I'm censoring for. And that expectation and that accountability, that allows you to, making sure you have all your stuff together, just like Crystal said, making sure that you don't give them a reason, just like Crystal said. Yep. Literally, you will be able to do, at least in your head, a little happy dance and mic drop as a come at me, bro. So that's my feel good. That's my motivation.
Absolutely.
So now, go ahead. Go.
I'm going to interrupt. I've got another question for you, Crystal, because I know for me, so we've only lived on post one time, did not have a great experience and have always lived off post ever since then. Of course, that was, 15 years ago, right when a lot of locations were turning into privatized housing. For us, we've always made it a point, and because we're off post with, private owned property management companies, we're able to be at our move out inspection. With everything going on with a lot of PPVs not allowing families to be at their move out inspection, if the family really wants to be there because they're concerned, they want to be a part of the process, they want to see what every little nitpicking thing that they're pointing out is, and not, firsthand, and not just through a picture or a written document. Can a family push to be there? Is there anything that will protect a family to allow them to be there for that move out inspection?
That's a really good question. Now, as far as coronavirus, I am always going to defer to the medical experts, right? It's whatever they say in that particular state, locale, region that they think is the best thing to do. But in those states where you can be present, I think the most important thing here is to communicate, right? And set the expectations with the PPVs and say, listen, Can we do a pre-inspection, which they should be doing pre-inspections?
Really?
Yes, they should. They should be doing pre-inspections to give you a heads up on, okay, hey, I need you to correct that blind. Okay, hey, I need you to do this, whatever, right? They need to give those families those pre-inspections. And so when the pre-inspection happens and the family has a clear understanding of what is expected of them, the pre-inspection has been treated more like, well, hey, guess what, guys? This is what we're going to charge you so you can save the money to pay us when you move out. That is not the point of a pre-inspection. It is to give the family an opportunity to make corrections. And by the way, I am also a landlord in the private side. And there is no way that I would ever do a pre-inspection in that way where I just go in and tell my family there, who, by the way, have been E3 and E4 and E5 families in my home, and say, hey, you guys messed up all this. You don't get a chance to fix it. I'm just going to charge you. That's not what that's for. And I'm also not referring to like major work either. Like if you've torn out walls, like, I'm sorry, bro, you're going to have to pay for that. I mean, for real. But if it's a blind, my gosh, go to Lowe's and buy the same exact blind. Super easy fix, right? Not a big deal. If the carpet needs to be cleaned, goodness gracious, like go have somebody professionally clean your carpet, like what you would do in the civilian world, right? So,
okay, Crystal, I'm just going to throw this out at you because I was not a grown-up in any form when I first became a military spouse, and I had lived with parents. And then I moved into military housing. And then it wasn't until we moved to Quantico just a couple of years ago that I paid my first electric bill, that I learned about deposits and I kind of, well, like most people in military life, I did things backwards. So, so for those people who are watching that are like me and have only ever experienced that, this is really good because they'll be on the lookout both on out in town and on base, which is perfect.
That's right.
We did have a question come in, which is from, is it Aeneas? Whatever it is, it's spelled beautifully, and I love it. Ms. Hernandez, shout out, girlfriend. All right, we're PCSing to Florida, and I'm worried of where we'll have to quarantine with kids and 2 dogs. Mm-hmm. Can housing deny us getting a home on base until after the quarantine is over?
I don't think so. I have not seen this happen. I am going to have to run that down. Because that might be a base or a PPV issue. But to be honest with you, this is literally the first I have ever heard or have had somebody with this kind of concern. Let me run that down. If that's okay.
Which is, so Ms. Hernandez, if you could please send us your email address and we'll get you an answer. I'm thinking right now you're just kind of concerned about that, which I totally get. You are looking at contingency plans for your contingency plans. You are one step ahead of many others, let me tell you. But send us your email address and we'll get it over to Crystal so she can get you that answer, okay? We also have a question from Michelle. Shout out, Michelle. Nice to hear from you. Even if they did, I guess, maybe deny them housing, wouldn't the military cover TLA for the ROM period?
So your TLA is still only going to be the 10-day period. However, if you have to do restriction of movement in a non-government facilities, like you have to stay at the Holiday Inn or something like that, they do have restriction of movement pay that you can receive to help cover those additional hotel days. But if you're able to restriction of movement in your home or you're a single soldier and they give you a barracks room type of deal, then you wouldn't be eligible for that.
Word. And thanks for that question, Michelle, because I'm going to, and kind of following up with that, because I certainly wouldn't have known, and many other people would have known to just follow up with that question, because we need contingency plans for those contingency plans, and knowing what support we have and resources we have before we walk into that mess is just so key. And I wish I had it so many times. Crystal, I was just telling Megan the other day, and I say it every week, I as a seasoned spouse, as a Cabernet spouse, because I'm not a French fry. I kind of like look at, still learn things, because obviously things are still changing, but there are things that I wish I go back and I'm like, I could have used this here. I could have used Megan here. I could have used Crystal here. You know what I mean? Like I literally, like I sometimes it almost makes me upset. And I'm like, can I just go back in time and redo that? But so it's honestly really appreciated. Okay, so here's what's next. What I would like for you to do, Crystal, is I would like you to tell our audience what kind of, because there's a lot, like my daughter, my daughter, 21 years old, with an airman, you know what I mean? Young, refuses to question authority, which is anybody's dream. She should have joined the military herself, but she is very reluctant because she doesn't want to disrespect her elders, because that's what I taught her whole life. And so she's reluctant to speak up. So if you find kids her age, I'm sorry, I don't mean kids. You find spouses her age.
Young adults.
And in that situation who are apprehensive, who are scared, who don't know, because that's an adult, that could be their parent, and their parents pushed into their brains, respect your adults, you don't talk back. What do they do? What would you advocate for them to do?
So one of the most important things for military families, and we've all heard of the 4 R's, right? Readiness, retention, resiliency, and recruitment. Okay. One of the things that I feel like family or military spouses and even our service members seem to not always have as a skill is the resiliency piece. And I feel like for spouses, this is a different generation, guys. This is not when my grandparents were in the service, right? And, my grandmother was like, serving all the command wives, that's not today, guys. Okay. This is a different generation. And if you have a question, even if you're afraid to stand up in front of people and ask, you should still find somebody quietly if you need to and ask. I would advocate for you to attend all of the classes that are available. Like for the Marine Corps, we have links and things like that you can attend. I would encourage you to make sure that you get involved with, military family readiness as it relates to volunteering with the units. Just don't get overused, right? Have boundaries. I would encourage you that if you see something that is wrong, I don't care if you're an E1 spouse or, a 4-star general spouse, you do what is right and stand up for what is right. And sometimes it can seem scary, and sometimes people will tell you, oh, it'll affect your husband's career. But just remember, that's retaliation. And if that happens, there are consequences for that. Don't ever let somebody control you with that kind of fear.
That is very, very good advice. I've said this to her before, and I've said this to many other people because I've witnessed it myself. Mm-hmm. Ask the question, make the statement, especially when your voice is shaking.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. All right. So with that, I would like to tell our audience that we are going to be putting all of those links here down in the bottom. And I just want to really quick give a shout out to Ms. Hernandez and Michelle and Heather for those amazing questions, because you're asking all of the right questions. And then we got a couple shout outs here, Lizanne. Hey, Lizanne. Today, right? Like, absolutely. And then, of course, we've got our Marla Batista. Hey, girlfriend. What up? And for those of you who don't know, Marla has the Bautista Project. Go ahead and put that in your Google search engine. Check it out. It's worth it. Shout out, girlfriend. And God, we just love our MilSpouse tribe, and we just love being able to put this information out. And let me tell you right now, Crystal, by the way, thank you for being on today, because Crystal, people, is on a vacation. She's on vacation, and she's still up in here with us just for you. By the way, she's in her little beach cottage, quarantining there on the beach, and she's doing this for you. She's on vacation. She's doing this for you, and I love that. And we are so grateful that you came on today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. And if there's anything I can ever do for anybody, please let me know. We're always happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Megan, of course, as always, our resident. We love her to death, and I'm so excited I get to see you next week. I get to see her every week. This is my job, people. I get to come on
together and have fun and educate and and help solve world issues together. It's
Yes. Yes, and you can too. So until next week, everybody, this too shall PCS. Bye.
Bye.